In the high-stakes world of mergers and acquisitions, companies spend billions on due diligence, right? Scrutinizing every asset, every liability. But what if one of the biggest risks, a potential multi-million-dollar time bomb, isn't even on the balance sheet? Well, let's dive right into this hidden software license trap that catches even the sharpest deal makers completely off guard.
Okay, before we get into the nuts and bolts, just a quick heads up on our source material. This is part 13 of a 15-part brief overview of a comprehensive research report on software license audits in multinational M&A environments by Virtualization Options LLC. Now, as you might expect, these explainers only discuss a fraction of what's in the full report. Also, this is not legal advice, and it doesn't come with any warranty expressed or implied. So for your specific situation, you should always talk to qualified legal counsel.
So here's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? A company pulls off this massive acquisition, everyone's celebrating the new assets, the new tech, and then the phone rings. And it hits them. The absolutely critical software that runs the entire business they just bought, it might not have legally transferred over with the sale. And look, this isn't some tiny oversight. This is a foundational risk that can totally derail an entire integration plan.
And that brings us right to the heart of the issue, what we're calling the M&A software trap. And it's a problem that really stems from a basic misunderstanding of what a software license actually is. Here's the key difference you've got to wrap your head around. When you buy a building, you own the building. It's a physical asset. Simple. But when you acquire software, you're not actually buying the code itself. You're buying a contractual right to use it. And that right is governed by a license agreement that, you guessed it, almost always has very specific rules about what happens when the company changes hands. The legal landmine behind this trap is something called a change of control provision. You'll find these things buried deep in the fine print of pretty much every enterprise software contract. And in plain English, it just means that if the ownership of the company holding the license changes, the software vendor gets to have a say. They can restrict, or in some cases, flat out block the transfer of that license to the new owner.
So why do vendors put these clauses in there? Well, it's all about control and, frankly, opportunity for them. For one, they want to protect their business interests. They don't want a license they sold to a small startup to suddenly end up in the hands of a global giant, or even worse, a direct competitor. But more strategically, an M&A event is a golden opportunity for them to pull you right back to the negotiating table, jack up the price, and consolidate agreements on their terms.
All right, so not all of these clauses are the same. To get through this maze, you have to decode what your specific license agreements are actually telling you. And it turns out, there's a whole spectrum of possibilities.
What's great about this is it lays out the 5 main categories you're likely to run into, from the absolute best case scenario to the worst. On the amazing end, you've got automatic transfer. Fantastic, but super rare. Then on the terrifying end, you have non-transferable, which means you literally have to buy the software all over again. Most companies, though, they're going to find their most important software living somewhere in those middle 3 categories.
Let's zoom in on the 2 most common and trickiest clauses you'll see. The difference between consent not unreasonably withheld and vendor discretion is huge. The first one, not unreasonably withheld, actually gives you some legal leverage. The vendor needs a valid business reason to say no, like you're their biggest competitor. But vendor discretion? That gives the software vendor all the power. They can say no for any reason at all, which basically means you have no choice but to renegotiate from scratch. Okay, so knowing the problem is one thing, but how do you actually solve it, right? What you need is a clear, actionable game plan. And that brings us to the 4-step transfer playbook, a structured way to manage this whole process from beginning to end. This playbook unfolds across 4 really critical phases, and it starts long before the deal is even signed. You've got your pre-transaction work, then pre-closing, post-closing, and finally, post-integration. Trust me, getting the timing right here is absolutely everything. Phase 1, pre-transaction, is all about due diligence. Think of yourself as a detective. You're hunting down every single software license, combing through each contract for those sneaky change of control clauses, and then ranking them by how critical they are to the business. For the really important stuff, you should even start having some informal chats with vendors just to see where they stand. Okay, now we're in phase 2, that intense final window before the deal closes. This is when it all gets official. You're firing off formal consent requests, tracking every single response like a hawk, and you're escalating any problems immediately. This is where the real horse trading happens, and you have to get any new terms locked down before that deal is finalized.
So the deal is closed, you pop the champagne, but the work is not over. Not even close. Phases 3 and 4 are about cleaning everything up, sending final notifications, updating all your records. But here's the cool part. This is where you can find some real value. You get to look for opportunities, like consolidating duplicate licenses between the two companies. That can lead to some massive cost savings that can help pay for this whole effort.
So when you put this all together, mastering this process, it isn't just about dodging a bullet. It's actually about turning a potential liability into a real strategic advantage during your M&A activity.
This quote from the source report really just hits the nail on the head. Software licenses can constitute significant value and substantial liability. They are both, and just ignoring them is simply not an option in any modern deal.
At the end of the day, it really just boils down to this. Proactive due diligence isn't a nice to have. It is the only way to protect your organization from massive, unexpected costs and total operational chaos after you buy a company. You have to find these problems before the deal closes, not after. And so I'll just leave you with this question to think about. An acquisition is the #1 reason a vendor will decide to audit you. So take a hard look at your own process. Is your M&A playbook truly ready for the intense scrutiny that is almost guaranteed to come your way?